to me, it's still unclear whether now is going to be the right time. Hi, everyone. My name is Matt Stoner, and I'm a co-founder and the creative director at Neuron, a leading UX, UI, and product design consultancy based in San Francisco, California. I've had the pleasure of leading or working on dozens of UX, UI design projects over the last 6 years of business with our brilliant and talented design team. I generally try to keep on top of the pulse of design, how it impacts the work we do in user experience, and the broader technology landscape as a whole. So the top trends talk has become an annual tradition of mine. I started doing them about 4 years ago. So this is a recap of a talk that I gave in June of this year that we live streamed at our beer and UX event in our office in San Francisco. I thought I'd re-record a version that could reach a wider audience and also be in a little bit higher resolution for those who couldn't see the screen clearly at the live stream of the event. So a little about Neuron. We are a UX UI design consultancy based in San Francisco. The majority of our projects are around B2B and enterprise software solutions, but we do take on mission critical interfaces like a radar and marine navigation product, telling a unique story through a marketing website, and even consumer facing mobile applications. So with that, we're going to jump into our top 10 UX UI trends for 2022. And it's really not just 2022, but more of a post-pandemic world. So in the past, when I discussed trends, it was more along the nuances of the visual design, the interactions, the various design patterns, and I related it to the evolutionary cycle or natural selection and how these trends sort of make their way into the market. But today's talk is going to be a little bit different than how I've done it in the past. We're going to talk about larger market forces that are and the things that are shaping the products that we use every day beyond sort of the superficial or nuances of visual design. So why look at trends? Shouldn't we be innovating on things that break the mold? In order to answer that, let's look at some of the things that have happened in the last year or two. We're going to look more broadly at the technology landscape and see what learnings we can apply to our design work in the coming months and years. So we're starting to see more mature use cases for blockchain technology, like in logistics and supply chain visibility. There's been a lot of hype around the metaverse and the race to build it since Meta gave their keynote last year. We've been caught up in this mania of NFTs, and one even sold for the whopping price of $69 million in 2021. We've also seen online communities and spaces like Discord see record growth during the pandemic. Apple's new privacy bombshell that limits apps' abilities to track users rippled through many industries, and we saw many workspace applications scramble to incorporate different ways for people to collaborate and integrate that into their product. So around meetings, chat, anything that got people communicating and collaborating. And throughout the pandemic, we saw a lot of what I call reactionary solutions. So things that solve short-term needs, like bringing things from the physical world into the digital space. We saw that with museums, or in the last trends talk I did, I discussed Hulu's Halloween haunted house experience. Now we're going to be talking about the continued need and use of more validated solutions and what's going to be more prominent moving forward. It's really going to stick. So with that, we're going to get into our first trend here. The first trend we'll look at is Web 3.0. So Web 1.0 was just getting information onto the internet. It was about very basic HTML websites. Web 2.0 was more about social connectivity, user-generated content, more interactivity, and that was really driven by mobile devices and the growing ability to start streaming video in real time. So as we move into Web 3.0, it's more about openness, decentralization, and greater utility for its users. So we're going to look at blockchain, decentralized apps or DApps, the metaverse, and some of the economics behind it. So a blockchain is a distributed database It's basically a ledger among the nodes of a computer network, and it helps generate trust without a trusted third party. So, in the past, we've heard many conversations about blockchain with cryptocurrencies as a way to facilitate and log transactions. So, and with that came Bitcoin, a cryptocurrency with the blockchain of the same name. So, this is the most successful cryptocurrency we've seen to date and has the most ubiquitous association with the concept of crypto. So, previously, most of the use cases of blockchain were centered around cryptocurrency transactions, but now we're seeing these more mature use cases like Maersk, who uses it to track and understand their supply chain and physical goods at great scale and in real time. We've seen this Votes application, which allows for secure mobile voting from anywhere across the globe. It's been used in municipal, midterm, and Senate elections across the United States, and it's been seen a very successful trial phase. Now, decentralized apps. This is an open source app that runs on a peer to peer blockchain free from the control of a single authority. In centralized applications, the company behind that application controls the information that they gather, including your information. And there's a growing movement to create more decentralized platforms, giving users more ownership of that data and information. So, regardless of the ethics behind it, some of the use cases include open source social media, which would be dedicated to more of a sense of internet freedom. In essence, you could say anything you want, and there's no censorship or moderation that an app like Facebook would do. So, this comes with its own dangers and almost harkens back to the Wild West of Web 1.0. But there does seem to be some demand for this out there. We're seeing various underlying technologies to help realize this vision of decentralized applications, like SmartChain.io, who's able to help regular businesses understand and implement smart contracts and use of the blockchain. Or Ceramic. This is a platform which acts as a decentralized database that any application can be built upon. And we're seeing the education around the DeFi or decentralized finance space and decentralized apps growing every day. Now, the metaverse. At the same time as Web 3.0 is coming up in conversations, we're now faced with the reality that the metaverse can now be a thing. This would be a simulated digital environment using AR and VR technologies, and it attempts to mimic all of the interactions we have in the real world, but in virtual space. One of the most successful implementations of this so far is coming from Epic Games, particularly with Fortnite. They've created this Soundwave series with different notable artists performing within their virtual environment. Players can come in, attend the event, listen to music, hang out with each other, collect coins that function as an in-app currency to use during gameplay, and really create a unique experience for users. And why it might be the right time for the metaverse to come to life is really due to tech like Unreal Engine. So the engines that are driving the rendering and ray tracing technology that enables the virtual world to look almost as seamless as the real world. Unreal Engine 5 is a very interesting project by Epic Games, beefing up the realism involved in these environments using multiple forms of ray tracing. And at the same time, internet speeds continue to improve, so we're able to deliver these kinds of amazing experiences in real time with very few glitches. So, what most people think most closely resembles the metaverse right now is being produced by Meta. One of their products, Horizon Worlds, is accessed via their Oculus device, and it's more or less just a video game. Um, but it also acts as a platform that enables you to build games on top of it. So, if anyone watched the Mark Zuckerberg keynote last year, Meta's vision is that everyone will be meeting, hanging out with friends, and doing many of the things we do in our work and personal lives in one of these environments. Another interesting point is that if Meta is successful in driving growth in this space, they could realistically just implement their own currency, create their own marketplace for digital goods. They could create a brand new ecosystem that they've more or less been forced out of, um, you know, due to their reliance of building on top of other platforms like Google and Apple's app stores for their products like Facebook and Instagram. So there's a lot of money and hype behind this idea. Um, on Sand Hill Road in Silicon Valley, there are a lot of conversations around the metaverse and many interesting projects coming out. But to me, it's still unclear whether now is going to be the right time. We certainly see a lot of factors lining up to make it feel like it is the right time. But if people don't have the need or want for this technology, they don't see its practical application in benefiting their lives. I'm not so sure it's going to be a success. It'll be really interesting to see how they begin to market this and if people start to slowly adopt it in their everyday lives. So the way the big players are thinking about it right now is that it's basically a race to see who can build the biggest and best metaverse, attract the most users as quickly as possible, and try to become that leader in the space, building the metaverse that everyone wants to hang out and work and build their applications on top of. But inevitably, there are some problems with that. If I have an account in one metaverse product and I have digital goods in that metaverse, I have cryptocurrency. How does that translate from one product to another? It's unlikely that it's going to go in the direction that there will be one metaverse to rule them all. But it's more likely that we'll have this scattering of experiences and people will want a way to navigate between those seamlessly. And that's where the economics of the system starts to come into play and dictate the terms here. They need to be able to support the transaction, the exchange, and the ownership experience inside of the metaverse. And there are several technologies right now that are starting to enable that to happen. So Ethereum was seemingly created for this use case. And a lot of current metaverse products are functioning on the Ethereum blockchain. It's also one of the most popular cryptocurrencies and is very closely connected to the NFT ownership experience. So most NFTs are using the Ethereum blockchain right now. Anyone who's been paying attention during the last 9 months or so has understood the hype around NFTs. We've seen a lot of interesting stories coming out, a lot of expensive sales of NFTs, and a lot of people discussing, are these things really worth it? Is it a Ponzi scheme? I asked the crowd at the event if anyone has ever owned an NFT, and not a single hand went up. So it's interesting that in the heart of San Francisco, the sort of tech capital, that not a single person owned one. One of the earliest NFTs projects was called CryptoPunks. And this is a very early use case that doesn't really begin to explore the possibilities of what an NFT could mean or represent. They're basically PNGs that live on a server. You get a unique identifying code that you are the owner of it. But essentially, it's just a small piece of digital artwork. The most expensive of these CryptoPunks sold for $23.7 million. So just to put that in perspective, there was a Picasso that sold this year, owned by Sean Connery, for $22 million. The oldest NFT that you can trade on a platform called OpenSea, one of the most prominent sites for purchasing NFTs, is PixelMap. So here you can purchase one of these pixels or more, and then you own the NFT for that specific pixel and can display whatever you want in that space. Sort of fun, sort of interesting, a way to advertise. But someone else had this brilliant idea about 17 years ago. A man named Alex Tu created a 1,000 pixel by 1,000 pixel website and sold each for $1. He made $1 million and funded his education and then some. It doesn't have that same unique sense of ownership, but essentially it's the same thing. This is the Beeple example that I referenced before. I'm really excited that artists are having their moment in the sun and being able to monetize their work digitally. I know that community struggles with instances of fraud, People have their art and their photos ripped off all the time. So being able to prove ownership and selling these pieces for large quantities of money is really exciting for them. But I think what we experienced was sort of an intense mania around NFTs. I started to speculate after this purchase that we could be in a little bit of a bubble, seeing as it sold for $69 million. And if housing in the real world wasn't expensive enough for you, now you might have to compete for virtual real estate as well. So in different metaverse products like Sandbox, the use of the blockchain NFTs combined with cryptocurrency allows for an economic model to function where you can purchase finite land in these environments. And many corporations are buying up this virtual land and building their own properties on it for the use of advertising space. Now, my college, Northeastern University, actually built their own campus in a product called Second Life. This product came out in 2003. This is an early iteration of the metaverse. And someone from my school had to actually build out this entire experience. Many of the buildings on campus, um, it even had a communication center that was pumped directly from the university with different messages if you could read the very blurry pixels. So we've seen these ideas tested in the past, but I'm really unsure whether now is the moment for the metaverse to realize its full potential. But in the Web 3.0 space, there are some really interesting concepts around gaming, specifically in the play to earn or P to E category. So this product called Axie Infinity is an interesting use case that combines cryptocurrencies and NFTs. You can collect, raise, and train these little monsters, similar to Pokemon, but each of them is their own NFT, and you have to purchase three of them just to get access to the game. But once you've done so, you can pit them against one another, earn crypto for the battles you go into and win. You can exchange and train them. You can breed Axies to earn and sell them, earn money on the platform. It's been really interesting to see how this benefits both parties because once you pay that upfront fee, you can monetize your experience playing the game. And it works to drive the growth of the game itself. And in developing countries during the pandemic, some users benefited from a scholarship program that fronted the upfront cost for players. So when everything was shut down in the real world, this enabled these individuals to monetize their time playing the virtual game and earn a little bit of money. So while cryptocurrency and Bitcoin specifically start to become more institutionalized, it still feels like the Wild West out there. And there are many cyber crimes and lack of regulation in the space. It's really difficult to crack down on this kind of thing because of the border of jurisdiction often makes it difficult. There are, crimes being committed uh, across national lines, and it's difficult to prosecute those kinds of criminals from other countries. So additionally, the fluctuation and volatility of crypto is pretty alarming. It's clear this year and last year that cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin are not immune from fluctuations in the larger markets and are actually beginning to almost follow the broader exchanges. So now we're going to talk a little bit about digital community. So with digital community, we're talking about creating and owning a community online. So being able to personalize that space to make it your own. This is something that's continued to grow throughout the pandemic, and I alluded to this a little bit in the intro. So, Discord is an interesting product, of course, that came out of a gaming use case. So it was a place where people could come talk about their games, chat over voice, even play games with one another. And it allowed people to create their own servers, invite the people that they play with, or just know and want to hang out with and talk to, and have these personalized environments for the things that they're trying to do with their friends. So to me, this is sort of the next evolution of social media. Social media's intention was always to connect us and get us communicating with one another, but it's become, such a beast. Here we see creating your own servers and hanging out with friends becoming a much more interesting and growing use case. Discord servers can be organized by topics. You can chat in any of these channels. You can have different topics within that server. And what's nice is that you can assign roles to various people and establish different levels of responsibility and ownership over the space and its moderation. And they have a robust marketplace and community space for plugins, so such as plugins to do moderation, or play music, or play games, or really do all sorts of things that you might do with people in real life. Another interesting feature is they even provide a way to build your own onboarding for your community to make it a bit more personalized and create an intake experience for newcomers. And Twitch also came out of an initial gaming use case, but it's since grown to cover all sorts of niche topics and skills. It continues to thrive during the pandemic and post pandemic and allows people to monetize their passions and stream directly to their fans. Meetup, which helped bring our audience together for the live event, is primarily for meeting people in the real world and organizing events. So they made a quick pivot during the pandemic to handle the virtual event use case. We've had 10 to 12 of these style of events during the pandemic where we did it virtually, but as things open up more and more, products like Meetup are going to see continued growth as people seek that human connection again. Now, Patreon, which you might know of, is a membership platform for content creators to build their community of supporters and monetize what they're passionate about. So, whether it's art or some other skill set, previously a lot of streamers or people displaying their skills on the internet was more of a top heavy situation with the top streamers making millions of dollars and then thinning out relatively quickly. And I think what's interesting about places like Patreon is that people that have a passion for something that is very or was once considered very niche and not mainstream can now make a living off of that passion virtually. It's very exciting and sort of what the initial intention behind the internet was. And YouTube also introduced a new community tab that's separate from videos and playlists, where creators can engage more directly with their audience. So a little interesting feature that they added. And a project that we are working on at the Neuron office is called GeoJam. So this is a consumer-facing mobile application, and it attempts to create a more meaningful level of engagement between musical artists and their fans. So fans can create community spaces, artists can create community spaces. There's an in-app currency called Jam. Um, Users are able to submit to competitions like what you want an artist's album art to be, or what you want their new single to be, or when do you want it to drop. Different competitions that they can have with their fans and create more of that engagement. So the next trend we're going to talk about is biometrics. These are biological measurements used to identify individuals, things like fingerprint mapping or facial recognition. There are a lot of interesting advancements in this space to solve various design problems, and let's check out a few of them now. So, of course, iOS's Face ID. During the pandemic, it was very difficult to open your phone using Face ID with your mask on. Apple advanced their facial recognition to just handle the top portion of your face, your eyes, and different features of your forehead to be able to unlock your phone without taking your mask off. So, obviously, that was very practical and actually had a real world health implication. Now, Xiaomi has introduced hardware that where you can touch anywhere on the screen to unlock the device using your fingerprint, saving users time and effort, but still providing that sense of security. And we're seeing more use of facial recognition in other situations, like in airports. So Star Alliance has introduced this program in Hamburg Airport where you can go quickly through security and other steps in your travel process purely using facial recognition. Or Innovatrix, who is doing some interesting things around what they call a liveness check. So they're trying to defeat fraud by scanning your image and checking it, making sure you are a real person and that you're the person that you say you are. I think it's going to be really difficult to get into a bar as an under 21-year-old in the future with a fake ID. That's for sure, with this newer kind of technology coming out to prevent these types of issues. Now, a less scary and more altruistic use case of this is IrisGuard. They partner with the UN and they're able to scan the irises of refugees and verify their identity without any unnecessary paperwork. I think it's a really, really exciting application of this technology. And this is a cool one that I've seen recently. It's called typing DNA. So there was this crime show a few years ago where they analyzed a criminal's handwriting in order to crack a case. And this is kind of like that, but the digital version of it. It can basically understand the cadence of your keystrokes that you click and the patterns around it. And then it can verify your identity using those patterns. Now, a project we're working on in the biometric space is called Q for Sales. So it's a product for a company called Unifor, and it analyzes the faces of people on video calls, sales calls in particular, and using their algorithms, they're able to get a sense of customer reactions and emotions during that meeting. So using that, it's able to provide a sentiment and engagement score back to you. So reporting that and how that changes over time. And this helps sales professionals that have adopted this product to improve their service while getting a sense of their EQ as opposed to their IQ. So qualities like empathy, politeness, and talk ratio take the focus here. So next we're going to talk about device agnostic experience. Now, this is a simple one. It's basically creating a simple, streamlined experience across many devices and systems. So the big players like Google and Apple are starting to see their 10 plus year visions come to life. They've built out these huge ecosystems of connected products that are very difficult to leave once you're within them. So you're incentivized to purchase products from them because they make connectivity between them so simple, and you're able to manage them all from one place. So video cameras, the temperature and internal environment of your house, your navigation, entertainment, you name it. And Apple is doing the same thing, of course. This ties back to our conversation about the metaverse and what we're seeing companies like Meta trying to do. They're trying to create their own ecosystem for the metaverse where they can build and layer applications on top of it. And their own ecosystem for additional purchases within that. Because right now, this is all dominated by companies like Google and Apple, Microsoft. Netflix is another ubiquitous example. Obviously, they started sending physical DVDs. Now we can stream content from any single device in our houses. Now, it's difficult to break in and sell products to consumers that, if they're not part of these Apple HomeKits or Google Assistants. But we're seeing a lot of success on the periphery, sort of with products that can connect with those ecosystems, but are not a direct competitor. So things like smart lights that connect to a central system. Something I realized while putting this presentation together was I was wondering why Apple has never tried to make an actual television. It seems like one of the only screens that they haven't tried to dominate and control. So you never know, we might see that in the next year and I'll say that I told you so. All right, we're going to take a little pause here and talk about a few UI trends. So my talks in the past have been more around these kinds of ideas, but obviously today we're exploring the more broader trends. So a lot of what I'm going to talk about here is things that are made possible by advanced JavaScript or rendering technologies that allow us to do more interesting things with our UIs. So first, let's look at dynamic cursor interaction. So some people might have seen this example on the web. I like it because it shows off the tech of moving your cursor on screen and seeing the animation react to it, seeing the colors around it change based on its placement. Now, what I like about this example is that it still indicates what the business does at its core, but it's very engaging, and you just want to keep exploring and hire this company. Now, in the realm of dynamic color palette, we're seeing Samsung doing some cool things here with their One UI. They've created multiple color palettes to allow users to customize theirs. So beyond just a dark mode and a light mode, they've specified accent colors and built palettes around it. So they're still designing this in a way that fits with their overall tone. It's matching their accessibility standards. It's still very much a controlled experience, but it allows their users to get that sense of personalization. In the realm of marketing websites, we're still seeing things like asymmetrical layouts, things that break your typical mold or grid structure that don't look like an enterprise product, really in an effort to stand out in these crowded markets. Advancements in 3D rendering, as well as increases in internet speeds, are going to allow products in the e-com space to give their users a more interesting experience in the future, to be able to inspect the products they're going to buy beforehand. So in this example, you're able to orbit, pan, check it out in 3D before committing to purchasing this drone. I can see this becoming more common in the e-commerce experience, even for clothing you might be looking at. Maybe being able to orbit around the shoes you want to buy, or even see your outfit on an avatar before buying it. And with websites that have to tell a unique story, it can be a great strategy to implement animation techniques that adjust on scroll. So moving down the page with you, helping to reinforce the messaging and make it a more engaging experience. Makes it feel much less like a 2D experience and something that you are taking part of. And another UI trend we're seeing is supersized text. So in this product example, this is a project Neuron designed over about a year ago, where we're contrasting text sizes with a very bold, stylized font to create these moments of impact in the messaging and pairing them with a more dialed back body copy. In cases like the contrast between the two can be very powerful. So the sixth trend here is personalized experience. So these are experiences that use user data and inputs to curate a more customized experience. Sometimes they provide helpful tips and tools for users before they ask for them. Now, we've seen this e-commerce use case for a long time on sites like Amazon. They're basically taking your inputs, your browsing history, your purchase history, and they're giving you recommendations for other products that you can buy. Or on social media, about every third post, you're seeing a targeted ad for some product they'd like for you to purchase. Now, that uses your browsing history using things like Facebook's Pixel tracker, especially Instagram, to see what you're doing on the web and suggest products that they think you might be interested in. This is obviously a huge part of their business model. Now, products like Spotify are not trying to sell you on another product, but they're trying to continuously sell you on their product. So the way that they use personalization is to provide you with better playlists, better music in general, things to explore based on your interests and playing history. They're really trying to just to keep you coming back to the app and engaged and enjoying the music you're listening to maintain you as a subscriber in that monthly revenue. Now, some products like Care of, and many products in the personal care space in general will utilize these short quizzes just to gain some information about you, learn more about your needs. They're really quick and simple in most cases. Yes, no, a few multiple choice questions in there. And then they're going to provide you with product recommendations. Or Function of Beauty. This is another example which focuses on hair products. Now, they're going to know a little bit about your hair, so they're collecting some data on you. The incentive there is then they're going to show you a more isolated set of products that you can purchase. This is essentially a twofold benefit because they're able to command your attention because they're only giving you 4 or 5 products to look at instead of their entire suite and forcing you to browse through it, and that way you're more likely to purchase because it's been customized for you. They're also asking users to put in just a little bit of work. And when we do this psychologically, we become a little bit more invested and are that much more likely to purchase from them. Now, NZXT is a PC building system. What's interesting is that they'll actually give you the frame rate for each of the games that you like to play so that you'll know ahead of time if a certain build can handle that game at the frame rate that you want. And by focusing on the game first, it leaves less of the research responsibility to the end user. The seventh trend we'll look at is advanced onboarding. So, as designers, we all know about the general benefits of onboarding. It's a critical part of a customer journey where we can convey the product's value. Many users make up their mind during onboarding whether they're actually going to continue and use the product. Now, Slack uses their resting state to introduce these little helpful tips and tricks to you. What's nice is that they highlight the areas where you must do these actions. They offer to teach you more if you want to, but give you a way to dismiss it if you would rather learn on your own or if you already are familiar with the application. The language they use is conversational and very approachable, and they make it really easy to turn off these hints or continue and learn more if you so choose. Grammarly is another interesting onboarding example. What they do is let you preview their product first. You're able to open up an example text file, see all the spelling and grammar mistakes. Then they showcase how you can make these changes and how seamless and intuitive their product is. This is an excellent example of product-led growth. So they're introducing the value of the product in a very controlled example while teaching you how to use their software. Notion is a project workspace and note-taking application for teams. So again, they're using a sample document here. This has a checklist component to it, and each of these checklist items teaches you how to do something different and introduces a new interaction or functionality of the product. Um, I thought this was a really fun way to introduce people to a product like note-taking, which you might tend to find a little bit dry. Now, Avast's business is related to online security and privacy, and in their onboarding, they just jump right to the value proposition. They allow you to limit all trackers immediately, and they allow you to opt out of various advertisements right off the bat. Reclaim AI is a calendar management application. So they have an interesting walkthrough as part of their onboarding where they're displaying via animation how the calendar works. They're also asking a few simple questions or inputs from the user to get information about you and how they can make your experience using the product better. Headspace has a really great onboarding. It's very simple. It's a set of questions around your experience with meditation, what goals you have, and what time of day you want to meditate. It's very simple to complete. I think with all these types of applications, whether the onboarding experience or recommendations and personalization, there's kind of a social contract that we engage in with these products. And in order for them to really be successful, especially in the future where there's so much more emphasis on privacy and a lack of tracking, what we give to the system has to be beneficial to the user. If that contract is broken and they're just taking your data and selling it, without any benefit to you, it doesn't really improve your life in some way. And that's a contract we're likely to break, and those companies are going to be unsuccessful as we sort of move out of um, this mentality of the user as the product. That's a good segue into our eighth trend of digital trust. So the two areas we're going to look at is data transparency and just ensuring security. So as we know, a lot of the products we use are grabbing large quantities of user data. So helping users understand how your product collects and uses their data greatly increases the sense of trust they'll have with you and your product. So this year, Apple dropped a huge bombshell around privacy. They introduced their app tracking transparency features, which allows users to basically disable tracking on all of the apps running on their iPhone and other devices. This has had a massive ripple effect on the companies that built themselves on top of Apple's infrastructure and don't control that ecosystem, like the Facebooks of the world. They've seen a huge drop off in their ability to target users based on their psychographics to serve them ads that they're likely to convert on and purchase the products that those ads are displaying. The update also creates this data report with a complete overview of each app's usage and ability to control which of them can log your private data. Now, for users, this is a beautiful feature that creates a lot of peace of mind. I know for me, I was concerned when I went in and used the feature to find out a few applications that I had no idea had access to different things like photos. So I definitely see the value in this new mentality of Apple. But for the companies that have a business model of targeted advertising have really struggled with this. It's such a bold move from Apple because the App Store brings in such a huge percentage of their revenue, and to just kind of pull the rug out from these companies, it's going to require them going back to the drawing board to really tweak their business models. I think the business model of targeted advertising and monetizing people's data is going to become more and more extinct as the broader public is educated and begins to value privacy more and more. So Apple's released these new features that are focused on privacy. And last year, when I did this talk, I discussed how Apple's advertising was really focused on privacy at the time. And this year, they dropped this new feature. So it really seems like this was a long-term strategic decision and was more than a few years in the making. We're seeing other products that were never really linked to privacy issues or data sales using messaging similar to Apple. Apple's kind of setting the trend. We're not going to sell your customer data, or we're never going to use traditional trackers that many companies use. It's becoming more of a selling point of these products and a point of pride in acquiring users that might be skeptical of other competitors. Pexip is a video communication platform, and one of their pledges is to use user data only to improve their product offering. So, going back to that idea of the social contract, that's one that I'd be willing to engage with. And further, they promise that their data will never be sold to third parties. And the design community is creating more and more education and instruction around how we should be designing for privacy. I know it's a big thing for us and our clients, and how we can give users the information they need, the opt-in cues that they need in order to understand where their data is going to be shared and why it must be shared. So ensuring security, the most basic yet crucial way to gain trust is just make sure that the data is secure. There's a few things we can do that are very simple just to start to build this sense of security and digital trust. So we're going to continue to see things like two-step authentication. This is obviously a really common way of ensuring the security of applications. Social logins basically just take advantage of bigger companies that have more security protocols and allow their OAuth system to do the work for you. We've seen big businesses created out of maintaining passwords. I'm not sure that this style of business will continue to be a big thing in the future, with a lot of different authentication methods coming out. I talked about this a bit during my last year's trends talk, but it seems like the password as a concept in general is slowly being phased out for other solutions. Um, but one password gives you a master security key that if you really wanted to be secure, you would just write it down physically. Now, you might think that these types of password keepers never get hacked, but they really do all the time. There's actually a pretty interesting website that shows all of the times that these password keepers have been hacked. Now, another password keeper, LastPass, they have quite an interesting feature where you can set up emergency contacts and timeframes where, let's say, my dad, for example, thought I was in an emergency, he could request access to my accounts. Now, if I'd set it up, if I don't respond within a certain time frame, say 24 hours, it would immediately release my master password to him so he could access my accounts to get me whatever assistance I needed. Now, a very simple but not as frequently used as it could be feature would just be to allow users to disable devices that are running their software on it. Companies like Microsoft do this all the time in their products, but this is a very simple way to allow users to control their privacy and understand all the places that they're logged in. So if there is a potential threat or a bad actor, they can very quickly kick them out. Now, nine, we're going to talk about enabling a hybrid workspace. So, right after the pandemic started, a lot of the focus was let's just get what we do in the real world into the internet. Let's get them built in the digital environment. But the one aspect of that, with more and more staying power as we kind of move forward out of this pandemic, is enabling a hybrid workspace or remote workspace. So, how do we work better online and in these hybrid environments? Here, we're relying a lot on advancements in integrations, plugins, and internal communication tools and other solutions. So obviously, everyone knows Zoom. It became huge during the pandemic, but they've taken a lot of strides to build out their own app ecosystem and marketplace. So instead of just having video calls with colleagues and friends, they've introduced all these various apps to enrich users' experience and help people work and have fun. So I'm using some examples here that designers and developers would use. Now here, GitHub has many integrations with things like Slack, Jira, and other tools to communicate between the different softwares that we use for work and makes it very seamless. Atlassian is pretty similar. You can help streamline the workflow between design, tech, and your other project management tools that you're using. Storybook.js is really interesting because it allows designers and developers to have a single repository or source of truth for the components in their applications. What I like about it is that you can basically see the exact UI layout and interactions. It takes it a bit further than simply seeing it in your Figma file, and it is easily accessible code snippets associated with it. And Figma has built out many different integrations to allow for collaboration. You can get updates on comments in files, integrate it with Slack, tie designs to different tickets in Asana and Trello, and so on. Now, I don't know if anyone else noticed this, but it seemed that during the pandemic, all the software I was using all of a sudden integrated voice and chat into their product. So we saw the huddle in Slack, the conversation in Figma, and the Google Workspace completely revised their side navigation to encourage you to go to chat spaces and meet to communicate with your coworkers. I just thought it was interesting that these voice over IP products were once these big standalone businesses, and now all the tools we use have these features directly incorporated into them. This is all obviously rooted in an effort to improve users' collaboration with teammates and also to keep you within their application and ecosystem. So with that, we're going to talk about the year's top design tools. We've reached the final section of the talk, and this is a little bit more laid back, so we can end on a fun note. We're going to talk about the year's top design tools, and as designers, we're always looking for different ways to improve how we work, whether it's brainstorming, design handoff with developers. We've seen that the products that streamline the entire process are seeing the most growth and adoption. So Figma has essentially taken over amongst most categories of the design process, from UI design, prototyping, design systems, versioning, and handoff. In the UXtools.co survey that I always reference during my trends talks, Figma's taken this top spot across the board, and Sketch is still somewhat relevant along with Adobe XD, but they have now a much smaller market share. Now, the first trends talk I gave in 2018, our team had already completely shifted over to Figma in our studio. We were evangelists at the time, and kind of predicted this trend, but we've really seen it, Figma just take over in the recent years. I think they're a unicorn now, valued over $1 billion, and they have a ton of resources at their disposal to just keep this thing going. Their introduction of collaboration into their product really revolutionized how we design with one another. They basically left everyone in the dust. We still see Adobe XD used a decent amount. This graph is not really market share, but people who use that product as part of their workflow. So that's why Illustrator and Photoshop are showing up here. They may still be used for graphics and icons and things, but not as much in UI or UX design. And I think what makes Figma great is that they stick to these 5 core values of collaborative, borderless, transparent, community-driven, and open sourced. So by being collaborative, allowing us to work in real time together in the same file, obviously this is amazing. Borderless, in that you can work from anywhere in the world. You can use it on the browser as well as the desktop application as well. They're transparent about their values and their various product updates and features. So in our office, when we preview their new releases, everyone gets really excited. They're great at generating hype around the features that they're going to drop. And of course, community driven. So they've done a great job building out the beta of what they call their community. You can find plugins, widgets, wireframe kits, icons, lots of examples of great user-generated work and resources from around the community that anyone can access with a subscription to Figma. You can learn how other people put their components together or download assets to use in your projects. There are some amazing plugins here to help you do things that their developers have not built yet, but it opens that up to the community to create useful tools to do unique things in Figma. And the most popular tool for brainstorming, as opposed to Figma or FigJam, is Miro. Miro is an online collaborative whiteboard. So they're not taking the approach that a lot of these other products are taking, like Adobe, InVision, or Figma, trying to be a full end-to-end design suite. They're just taking on the virtual whiteboard space and trying to make the best user experience possible. So as opposed to creating a robust design-centric product suite, they've nicely carved out their own space. As far as research tools, we see Zoom taking the top placement for user research, user testing for recruiting, and Notion, which is a really interesting product that a lot of you might use for a project repository. So we all know about Zoom, obviously great video platform for doing user research. For user testing, we're seeing a lot more being conducted remotely as opposed to in person, and that's enabled by products like usertesting.com. And for the repository category, the top tool here is Notion. This is a project workspace for teams. They make it very clean with their UI, very heavy on white space, emojis, it makes the experience of working more enjoyable with its organization methods. I think this particular arena of repository products is going to have fierce competition from other products like Coda, Basecamp, and others that are trying to solve similar problems for teams. And with that, that concludes the 10 trends. Thank you for watching. I hope to see many of you virtually or in person at a Beer and UX meetup in the future. You can join our meetup group at the link in the video notes. Beer and UX is a product of Neuron, a leading UX, UI, and product design studio based in San Francisco, California, and I hope to see you all next time.